Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. If you have your own song you'd like to submit for special selections, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today's comes at us from Deathmosphere. Can't believe this is my first Melodeath recommendation. However, the melody has been stuck in my head for the past couple of days after rediscovering it recently. Take in notice how the harsh vocal is rhythmically filling up everything. We have the track Deathmosphere from the band Under Threat. Let's dive into this and see what Under Threat is bringing to the table today. I love that phasing in and out of our guitar tone on the left.
That is the quintessential illusion, simultaneously the source of your greatest strength and your greatest weakness.
Changing notes every 2 beats. I love that cymbal work going on in the background. Really fun rhythmic ideas in half of this vocal work, playing around with offbeat hits. Very wide production too. Yeah, having those leading pickup notes. It's really interesting too that leading tone idea is actually a variation of the first verse's idea, just with some of those pedal tones taken out. Taking it up a third. Use of silence right there to really punctuate the change. I love this riff. Interesting. So this is interesting. This is obviously a very rhythmic style of playing, but we do get a little bit of melody and harmony primarily in here, which is why it's called melodic death. It's the mellow part. Um, but it's done so in a way that I think can make both camps happy. I think if you listen to metal for the rhythmic aspect and the texture, and you just want those really cool sounding riffs, they've got that. If you need more melodic or harmonic depth, they have that too. It's not as strong as the coolness of that textural factor. I think they still lean harder into that texture metal, but there's still enough melodic element in here that can pull me in, and I'm probably the biggest person here who, or I'm probably the person here in the community who needs the most melody out of my metal. So I'm sure there are some people who are going to feel like it's not enough, and that's normal. That's fine. There's everybody's got their own thresholds for it, but it does sit right there in the pocket for me, where it has just enough to keep me interested throughout the track. And also variety. Let me touch on that for a second, right? For a band who doesn't change their guitar tone, don't bring in any acoustic sections, has one type of vocal sound, and the bass is pretty much non-existent in the mix. It is a song that has a lot of stuff going on. I could not tell you the structure of the track. Lyrically, I couldn't pick up any words, so I can't even tell you if we have a lyrical repetition. And musically, there were a couple of ideas that I felt were repeated that I could probably point to and say, yeah, it's probably the chorus right there. But aside from that, I honestly don't know what the structure of the song is other than hearing a couple of vague similarities between sections. There's so many riffs in here that it keeps everything feeling fresh, even when we don't have a semblance of. Well, let me take that back. Even when we're borrowing ideas from something we've already used, we're reutilizing them in a new way. Write smarter, not harder. So, for example, I think it was our second verse, maybe? I had mentioned that there's this really cool pickup idea where we were having these 16th notes before the downbeats, and we have the da 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 da, that kind of real quick vibe. That's actually that driving element from the beginning with the constant picking. Just remove the pedal tone. So instead of da 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 da, not exactly what they were playing, but you get the picture. There's all these hits between the other two. Just get rid of those pedal tones, those sitting, riding on that one note. Just play the moving ideas. And that's where we get that element. But isolated, you don't really notice it because a lot of the groove is based off of riding on that low tone. So without that groove, it actually feels like a very different section. And it took me a second. I didn't pick up on it until the end of it. And I think when I made the comment, we were actually moving into the next idea, anyways. So you probably didn't get a chance to actually hear what I was saying and maybe work on it. I might have had to rewind for it, but yeah, like it took me that long to figure it out, but I'm pretty sure that's what they were doing. They took what they already had and just got rid of one component of it. They reused something they'd already written. It's so good. It makes me wonder how often that actually showed up in the track. Not even just with the guitars, but what about the drum work and the vocal work, which is for both of them 99% rhythmic writing. There are some perceived note changes in our growls, and drums, depending on how you want to look at them, can have a melodic component to them, as the toms and the snare even are pitched, and our cymbals have different perceived pitches to them. But again, for the most part, it all feels mostly rhythmically oriented. Are there any rhythmic ideas that maybe I didn't pick up on because there's no pitch associated for me? I just have an easier time picking out melodic comparisons than rhythmic ones. So without a melodic component to it, I have a more difficult time finding patterns in the comparing rhythms. But it's very possible that that happened as well. Maybe there was a section that the drummer utilized and just removed or added, embellished some ideas, created a variation of to use later. Um, Same thing with the vocals. They could have reused rhythms as well that I didn't pick up on. For the most part, though, those two seemed rather not static, linear, the opposite of static. They seemed rather linear. I didn't really pick up on many patterns for either of those. It's really the guitars that informed any notion I had of structure to this track, and repeating sections. But yeah, just a ton of variety going on. I just think that's awesome. Um, I want to touch on the drums real quick because this is a fast song and the drums do not really let up at all. The tempo is easily 150-ish, maybe even a little higher. We're talking about a pretty brisk pace, and our drummer is constantly playing eighth or 16th notes in that tempo. He's just a blistering speed, and keeping it consistent. There were a couple of times when I felt some rhythmic faltering, but none of them that really called my attention to them in the way that maybe some other bands in the past I've been like, oh, there's some humanity in there. We don't have perfection. Usually, when we're looking at bands that came out while we were still recording on tape, when we didn't really have ways to correct that or spend hours doing take after take after take after take to make a take from all of our takes, which is where it's starting to sound weird. Um, there were a couple of moments. Like I said, they didn't really stand out to me as drifting. It's not really dragging or rushing. Just a couple of moments where it was a hair too fast or hair too slow. I'm like, oh, starting to lose it a little bit, but gets right back into it. And just the raw consistency at this speed for the entirety of the track and for live shows, the entirety of a show, assuming the rest of the music is like that, is just mind boggling. The dude is a machine. But I really enjoy, this is a topic I've touched on a couple of times. I point to Archspire as like that raw robotic precision, and I really love it in that style. But when it comes to this, I love hearing that little. I mean, I actually love this more often than I love the robotic. The robotic's more of a special cases where that raw perfection, or the not even raw, an unachievable perfection actually sounds really good. But I love hearing these little moments here where it feels like we're speeding up or slowing down just a hair because it reminds me, hey, this dude's a human. He's not perfect, but he's tearing it up anyways, and he's just got this consistency, this precision to it all. Um, yeah, it's just bonkers thinking about. Um, but yeah, constantly, all the time. But then there's also that cymbal work at the beginning. I wish we would have heard more of this. I think the only other time that the cymbals really called my attention to themselves was he was just basically doing what is that, blast beats on the cymbal. I think it was the ride, just going to town on it at such a speed. Otherwise, the ride cymbal at the beginning was really the only time that I really heard a lot of nuance to the drumming. Everything else was just pure aggression, that raw, constant attack, which is impressive on its own. But I do really like the more nuanced playing. So I enjoyed that being there for a moment, at least. Um, I do need to talk about the vocalist since our requester did bring it up and told me to pay attention to it. Here's the interesting thing about the vocals, they are at different times rhythmically intense and rhythmically simple. And it's odd trying to figure out when the vocalist is deciding to go into either mode. You see, sometimes we're lining up with what the guitars and drum are doing as far as accented beats. For instance, at the beginning, I was talking about that really fast playing where we had accents on one, and then one, two, three, and then the of four into the next one. Um, Sometimes the vocalist during that first verse, I think, would lean into those accented hits and line up with what the guitars are doing and really get that nice, clean, band wide syncopated hits. And other times they would syncopate none at all. They would just have these constant downbeat attacks, which by themselves is not interesting, but you really got to look at it in the context of things and listen to what else is being accented around them, what kind of syncopations we're hearing in other places, and how that might bounce off of what our vocalist is doing. So it doesn't always line up to a point where it's interesting, but more often than not, I would think, oh, well, that was kind of neat. The vocalist decided to go for a very simple idea, but another instrument wasn't. And we get sort of a rhythmic counterplay going on where there's two interesting, well, one of them is being made more interesting because of the way that it dances around one that is being syncopated. Um, and it's like I said, it's neat. I don't know that it's anything that really stands out to me as exceptional rhythmic writing. And again, I can't find a pattern to it. Sometimes the vocalist digs in with everyone else and sometimes carves their own path with a simpler idea, but it is something that stands out to me. Every time it came up, I was like, "Huh, okay. That's interesting." And like I said, I don't really know if there's anything I want to add on to it. I don't know if I should really even point it out as like a strong suit of the band because it kind of seems chaotic at times. Some verses or some sections will have alternating, and that seems pretty planned. We'll do four beats of syncopated in line with the guitars, and then four beats outside of what the guitars are doing with a simpler accented rhythm. Other times it's always leaning into the guitars, and sometimes it's like three bars of leaning in with the guitars and then one bar of not. And it just, like I said, it seems a bit chaotic and random. So I'd have to listen to more Underthreat to have a stronger opinion about their use of rhythmic ideas. But at least right here, I find it interesting. Um, and that's pretty much the whole song, isn't it? Oh, I want to talk about the guitar solo. It was short and sweet, but it worked. It was like, I mean, at this speed, I always have to think about it because I feel the song in halftime because I'm not going to sit here and count one, two, three, four, one, two, three, four. Like, that's just exhausting. So I'm feeling it in halftime, which means it felt like. It felt like a short solo in that regard. It was like 4 bars, but I think it was probably 8, maybe 16, depending on how they felt the tempo. Um, but it moved through at a decent pace. I felt like I was constantly holding on to like the tail end of the solo, having it drag me through these sections as I'm trying to figure out what we just listened to. I'm not ready to get pulled into the next idea yet. I'm still trying to figure out what happened here, and the guitarist is just moving on. It was a fast solo, but everything flowed together nicely. And like I said, short and sweet. By the time it started, it felt like we were already done. But yeah, so I think it worked really well. But it also did feel like a solo for solo's sake. Probably because it was so fast, and probably because I had no emotional connection to it. Primarily because it was such a short idea, but also because it also just felt like it was. We went into the solo section because metal songs have solo sections, and we came out of it and went back to what we were doing because it didn't really seem to have an impact on what the song was achieving. So for better or worse, though, right? We talk about this all the time. Does a song need to be thematically cohesive from start to finish every single time? No, that's ridiculous. Every song should be doing what it wants to do. This song wants to just follow along with some more standard or with standard ideas of how to make a metal song. They want to put a solo in there for solo's sake. Go for it. Do it. The solo was great. Um, but yeah, I mean, I do feel like it was unnecessary. If that's, I mean, Also depends on where you like. I could imagine somebody like solo unnecessary. How could you even say that? Every solo is awesome. And like, yeah, I do enjoy instrumental moments for sure. I enjoy my instrumental tracks. I have more time playing purely instrumental music in my life than playing music where there's lyrics involved. Um, I will always support instrumental moments, but sometimes it feels like they're just not necessary. But that's kind of where this felt. But again, they don't have to be in every song, they don't have to have purpose in every song. All right, let's dive into some lyrics. Welcome to my world of blood-stained skies and darkened earth, visions of black waters bleeding down from the shattered landscape. Feel the bitter taste of my agony, the irrational rate of anger that emanates from the Creator, while fragments of reason drown in the seas of madness. This matches the intensity and feeling of the song 100%. It is just driving, it's aggressive, it's heavy, it's surface level and a bit. I wouldn't say there's anything here that is exceptionally metaphorical, or anything that is multi. Well, there is metaphor here, but nothing I would say is multi-leveled, where you would have to understand one element to understand what they're trying to say that would fit in with what's going on here. Everything's surface level, just like the music. The music is cool, it's aggressive, it's got bite, feels very metally, it's awesome to listen to, it's got that groove, makes you want to headbang, but there's nothing really deep about it. Um, and just a perfect pairing here. So we just have somebody who has crafted a world in their vision, and their vision is just hatred, rage, anger, agony is one of the words they use, and everything kind of lines up with that. The skies are red, the waters are black. Instead of a waterfall, we would talk about water falling. He says the waters bleed. Watch me feeding myself with this pain, strengthening my senses with fear, finding the force to stay alive into this deathmosphere. So, yeah. I mean, this is actually interesting because it seems self reflective. Our narrator understands that their strength and their sense of self is crafted by the negative emotions here, the pain and the fear. And he actually fights to stay alive within this environment, the Deathmosphere. The narrator even seems to understand the toxicity of this environment, but there hasn't been any comment about that yet, other than the fact that it's not a great environment to be in. Experience the self diminishing effect of a deprived existence as the awareness of your own mortality paints the grotesque scenario. Feel the cold hand of cruelty tearing out your spine. The smell of reality is the stink of your dead, rotting fantasy. Okay. So this is interesting, is that he's creating a parallel between the real world and his deathmosphere, his reality, his fantasy of suffering. And he says this is visually disgusting and it's filled with all this negativity, but so is your world. So is your reality. It's just not as grotesque visually. You don't really notice it. Wake up and see the raw essence of this infernal nightmare, the true source of pain and hate. Watch me feeding myself with this pain. So yeah, it says that this is all internal. This is the source of my pain and my hate is myself, and I feed myself from my pain, from the pain of this world, which is a reflection of me. It's stated right here that it's cyclical. The sound of distant echoes of forgotten voices drowned in the seas of madness, memories of sanity and order suffocated by the weight of impossibility, constant sensations of powerless, desperation increases your already well-developed sense of irony. Yeah, I mean, like I said, pretty surface level read here. This is just a very bad place to be, filled with a lot of negativity that works to break people down who exist within it, and our narrator exists within it and reflects this world that they're in. Oh, I forgot to talk about melody. Um, I want to talk about this real quick. It won't take long, I promise. Unless you're here for a long video, in which case I'm sorry, this won't take very long. Melody here is utilized very metally. Yeah, it's designed and built from a very rhythmic and textural perspective, where again, it's not so much about diving into deep rhythmic ideas as much as just including harmonic components into a very metally rhythmic perspective. So, like we heard at the end, we have small rises in our ideas that are still punctuated with those, um, riding out that low tone. So to slow it down a little bit so I could actually sing it, imagine we have doon 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 doon. So we still have that pedal tone down here, but we're rising. And when we take the pedal tones out, we have this doon doon doon, kind of a melodic idea. Now, they amplify that in a little bit by not just having one note, but having two or three notes. Dun 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 dun, something like that, right? Now they take that even a step further and harmonize it, which is something we heard there at the end as well, where a second guitar will play the same line, but there'll be a third or a fifth higher to provide some harmony to it. So it is a melodic idea, but it's also very rooted in that textural rule of cool stuff that metal does. There is one line at the end that I really liked. We had that riding pedal tone idea, and we did that for 4 bars. And then the latter for 4 bars were more of this tremolo picking. And it was one of the few moments where we didn't have a pedal tone interrupting the melodic idea. Granted, it was just tremolo picking of a single note, so if we remove all the attacks, we just have whole notes, and it's like holding out da, 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 something like that. But it's done with its metal idea of speed and aggression, so you get all the attacks in there. But it's one of the few moments, like I said, where we don't have a pedal tone interrupting the melody, and I thought it was a great contrast from everything else that we had heard throughout the track. All right, those are my thoughts on Deathmosphere by Under Threat. This is where you guys come in, hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed this or not, anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to, draw my attention to or correct me on. Let me know. Above the comment section is a description box. In there is a link to Linktree, which takes you to this menu right here. It has links to everything related to the channel. You can follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, support the channel through Patreon, submit your own special selections, and so much more. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, continuing on with this week's theme and checking out more special selections. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.